This is the Neoliberal Round Podcast.
They are in 26, and that is why they are now. Well, first of all, I don't even know if there's an after. Is there an after now, Pedro? First of all,
it has a new name now, but it might not live long with that new name because Trump is talking about renegotiating again. And
they just renegotiated NAFTA, and that is why. Well, that is what I said. That is what. Now this comes. That is neoliberalism here. I said to you, perhaps. I said, perhaps they are charting their own course by the few corrupt of the status quo, who are benefiting from partnerships with the neoliberal regime of the Washington Consensus, advocates of the bureaucratic phenomenon, while the masses are left behind. Now, this is the term. This is important. John Williamson, the inventor of the term Washington Consensus, believes the term has two quite different meanings. First is the meaning he gave the term, which involved consensus around a set of 10 policy reforms, which he believed were widely accepted as beneficial by economists in the original formulation. These were fiscal discipline, redirection of public expenditure priorities towards fields offering both high economic returns and the potential to improve economic distribution, such as primary health care, primary education, and infrastructure. 3. Tax reform to lower marginal rates and broaden the tax base. 4. Interest rate liberalization. 5. Competitive exchange rate. 6. Trade liberalization. 7. Liberalization of foreign direct international inflows. 8. Privatization. 9. Deregulation in the sense of abolishing barriers to entry and exit. And 10. Secure property rights. Second is the meaning the term has acquired: market fundamentalism or neoliberalism, laissez-faire, Reaganomics. Let us bash the states. The markets will resolve everything. So the concept of neoliberalism is this, again, the idea of fiscal discipline and direction of public expenditure and trade liberalization and FDI flows and private. It sounds good. Neoliberalism sounds good. But
in practice,
it means this: market fundamentalism or neoliberalism or laissez-faire Reaganomics. Let us bash the states. The market will resolve everything. But in effect, it is not the market. The market is we talk about an inanimate object. We talk about the market does not have a will of its own. And when you talk about market is where buyers and sellers transact. That's right. Where market and sellers transact. But that is not just the market in truth and in fact. The market involves powerful brokers, powerful players who set rules and regulation, who don't have to abide by them, and who set interest rates through various bodies, such as in the US we call the Reserve Bank and so on, who actually affect behavior. Remember, so the market have to do with behavior. And so, they said, in a free market, it's the buyers that set. But that is not true. The behavior can be manipulated through policies, through various regulatory regulations of the state. And of course, we talk about the issue of the inflation or how you print money, when you print money. We talk about who controls the National Reserve and how they can manipulate behavior. So the behavior can also affect that. And so I tell you, so you give, say for example, what's happening now, you want to extend Donald Trump tax returns, give $880 billion. Because this is Reaganomics, which is part of neoliberalism, okay? If you give the funds to the top, to the wealthiest of the people, it will trickle down.
It will trickle down to the bottom, but that's which is a notion has been discredited, but that doesn't stop them from using it again. If you just join us, you're listening to a new episode of Neglected Stories, People, History, and Movement. And we are discussing neoliberalism, globalization, and we have our guest, the Reverend Renaldo McKenzie, who has studied this issue really in depth, and is providing some insight into its impact both here in the United States and throughout the world. Before you mentioned that the whole Protestant ethics, that you work hard and you'll be rewarded.
Yes.
And then, but you mentioned also that a lot of the fortunes were actually built on theft, stealing from other people. And that reminds me of the when you open the book, the Godfather by Mario Puzo, which became a very famous and historical and iconic movie. There is a quote there that the writer wrote. He said that behind each great fortune there is a crime, which was first penned by Honorato de Balzac, the French writer. You talk about the financialization of the neoliberal policies, and then that through that mechanism, that in turn impacts poverty and economic stability in various regions around the world. Can you talk a little about the financialization? I assume that when I ask you, is you talk about the domination of Wall Street, basically, as being on top of the food chain from the wealthy elites.
Yes. Let me talk about that a little bit, because, and that's what's going, that when you talk about and in the second book I talk about that, I go in depth a little bit more, looking at the financial, looking at how the world is structured in terms of classes and the dominant class. And of course, the Wall Street is part of that dominant class. And I don't want to give away too much, because I'm going to be talking about that in a lecture, and I'm going to be publishing that in the next book coming up, talking about Wall Street and how they form part of the dominant class. But if you see what happened the other day, how Wall Street reacted when Donald Trump made an announcement, and who was it recently? A famous senator. Who was it that recently said? The senator said, when Wall Street talks, we listen. You remember that?
There used to be a big commercial.
When
one of the financial firms. And then you talk about the recent developments within the stock market that has lost almost $5 trillion in valuation when Donald Trump started talking about enacting tariff against Mexico, China, Europe, and China in Canada. So
it goes, and this goes to show, and this is an example of how powerful Wall Street is. But who controls Wall Street? It is not the guy who's giving $1, $20, or $25,000. It's the billionaires and the billionaires like the Elon Musks. And the Zuckerbergs and so on. It's those who have historically controlled, it's old money, quote unquote, old money, those who have historically controlled wealth throughout the world. Though they are the ones that are heavily invested on Wall Street. And many of these transnational and multinational companies are on Wall Street. Okay, their businesses, they are involved in the stock market. And so their interests are also tied to the stock market. And so when we talk about the financialization of the world, it is to suggest that when you look at, first of all, I could ask the question, and I was earlier this morning before you called me, I was reading a book. I was reading Who Rules America? Challenges to Corporate and Class Dominance. Who Rules America? And that's according to William Dumhorth. And in the book, he talks about how if you want to look at who rules America or the world, one of the ways you want to look at some of these Ivy League institutions and look at who is on their who's on the board of trustees, or look at how money flows. So one of the ways we're able to arrive at the conclusion in terms of the financialization of the society, and in terms of how that and how the dominant class, who controls finances, who controls the stock market, who controls and are heavily invested in the stock market, and also are also involved in the regulatory bodies such as the National Reserves. Just so you know, the National Reserves involves many financial institutions. Okay, and the National Reserves is what make determination about how money that make determination that affect the distribution of money in society. They have the power to mop up liquidity or to allow it to run its course. So, and the National Reserve involves powerful bankers and private interest and investors and their decision making have control over systems of government, institutions, multinationals, and transnationals. And that's what we're talking about. And you look at how money flows from Wall Street to banks to institutions, not only that, also in terms of aid. You look at Donald Trump today, who's president of the U.S. And first of all, I meant to read a note, but I don't even, let me not read that, because let's point to Donald Trump again. I understand that Elon Musk gave him $250,000, no, sorry, not $250,000, $350 million.
During the presidential campaign, yeah.
$350 million, okay? And now you find that Donald Trump is his closest advisor, and Donald Trump and Elon Musk and billionaires who themselves are financiers are controlling the decision and the policy making in the country. And that's not new though. What Donald Trump is doing, probably they're doing it more publicly. I was reading this morning William Domhoff, and William Domhoff from 2008 said this. In 2008, I was reading the book William Dom. Where is the book? He said, if I could find it, I'll have to look at it later on. But he talks about the fact that why don't the richest nation in the world also have the most poverty compared to Canada, Western Europe, and Japan? And why did all the gaps in wealth, income, and security increase between 1980, 2008, and so on and so forth? And then he goes to show corporate greed. The corporations, banks, and the businesses form a corporate community. We talk about the I was privileged to be taught and to be advised by Walter Litt, who wrote the economic history, labor history of America, and he developed the concept of connectionism, and how since from the early part of the 1900s, with the idea of these institutions and groups forming connections, unions forming these associations, making it difficult for people to come in, has also served created part of the problem. But anyways, according to Domhoff, corporations, banks, and the businesses form a corporate community that fit the federal government on the policy issues of interest to it, issues that have a major impact on the income, job security, and well-being of most other Americans. At the same time, there is a competition for profit opportunities within the corporate community. So, what is happening now is not new in terms of very wealthy people forming an oligarchy to control the government. But they're just doing it now more publicly. We economists and social scientists have always studied that, and we are seeing that. And we have, and I'm telling, if you were to read the book Who Rules America by William Domhoff, Challenge to Corporate and Class Dominance from 2008, is also part of I reference it in my new book. It talks about how corporate community formulated by corporations and banks and financiers, how they shape the federal government on policy interests. It means they also shape policy, international policy, policy that affect the global south, policy that affect internal colonies like Philadelphia, okay, Detroit, and so on and so forth. And that is what we're talking about here.
So in one of the things I was really interested in your view about this whole situation is that you also discuss that there has always been a resistance to this. There was resistance to colonialism, there was resistance to imperialism, and now there is resistance to globalization and neoliberalism. Could you kind of tell our listeners what is that resistance and how it's manifesting itself here in the United States and around the world?
Well, globalization, I studied globalization and look at, when I came to the US, I wanted to find out why is it that globalization has not created real gains or benefits for people of the global south. Of course, part of that is the legacy of colonialism. If you post-colonial theory or post-colonialism, look at the lingering or enduring effects of colonization. But colonization is a strategy in itself, just like neoliberalism, capitalism. These are all strategies built in a Protestant ethic, but that is also deeply Pharisaical, which continues benefits and gains for the few over the many, because we live in a racial society, a society not just across the world based on privilege and status and class. Globalization, which was supposed to be the sine qua non, or the ideal. Globalization, when people were talking about globalization, we thought that the world was opening up great opportunities for the global people in the global south to start to trading with other countries and so on and so forth, exporting goods, developing a level of development. But that did not happen. Globalization has not helped. It has only killed local economies. Do you know why? Because global south countries coming out of globalization, or countries stemming from colonization, or peoples within the US, or even working class people, because I know I'm advocating, I'm not only looking at it racially, but we live in a society in terms of there's a society based on a pyramid, a status, a system. So you have the black and brown people at the bottom of society, or if there's a working class, they're at the bottom, but there's a working class, and the working class occupy the bottom rung in society. Okay, and of course we talk about Martin Oppenheimer, William Dumhoff, and many social scientists talk about the bottoming out of the middle class. So right now, where there is not really a middle class, there is only a working class and a wealthy class, or a capitalist class. Okay, and so who benefits from globalization? The capitalist class. The working class have not benefited, or peoples haven't benefited from globalization in the way that it has now been. So that is why people are against global trade. People are against globalization because it has not benefited peoples in societies. And that is why there is an attack against globalization. But I think globalization...
And many of us, especially the white working class in the United States, voted for Trump because he spoke somehow against globalization, although he's being a demagogue. He's not actually going to put into practice any policy that will benefit the working class in the United States that voted for him.
And where are these people starting from as well? Okay, fine. Globalization involves competition. And fine, we can't be naive. We live in a competitive world. Human beings are competitive. That is the starting point. The starting point is life is about people and how people relate. Yet life is what you make it, or you allow others to make of it for us. Foucault talks about, who's a postmodernist, talks about how the relationship between knowledge and institutions. And institutions are developed to maintain a particular kind of knowledge. Knowledge that has served to keep people down, or the masses down. I don't like to use the word masses because now they're going to say, oh, he sounds like a Marxist or some crazy guy. But this is true, though. To keep knowledge, to maintain, say, for example, one of my friends says that he wanted to do computer studies when he was in high school, but he was denied the opportunity, or they never had it. So he went to college, and he could not do a course because he wanted to do computer tech something, but they would not allow. But because he didn't do they never had it at his school, in a public school in Philadelphia. He couldn't do he ended up doing social work, and he was a social worker for years. Okay, you see how the system works for years. So that is what I am talking about. So a knowledge base is created within a particular community to maintain a certain industry, occupation within that community, within that race, within that industry, or within that, or let's say for example, Jamaica, the kind of aid that they get, or the kind of is aid that helps to develop their servitude, the tourist industry. But Jamaica, and then at the end of the day, these same people don't have money to go to these expensive hotels charging US dollars. Now they're trying to make it open to others, but the point I'm trying to make, because
you build those places, and then the local population cannot afford. So there are movements in the United States and Europe and in the global South against globalization, and what are they? And briefly, we don't have that.
I mean, well, you have the global justice. I mean, there's the global justice movement, but it's not. It's the global justice movement wasn't against globalization, but it was against neoliberal globalization. It was against multinationalism and transnationalism. When people think about globalization, they cannot dissociate it from multinationalism and multinationalism. So yes, there has historically been, and if you read the books, I talk about the move since 1999 against multinationalism, transnationalism, and of course we call it the global justice movement that exists in various forms. But there has been a retreat from multinationalism, globalization that focuses on multinationalism and transnationalism or unfair competition. There has been, but there has been a retreat. And as I said to you in the book, there hasn't been a coordinated effort against multinationalism, transnationalism, against the power base of others. But now, since with the rising of the Iran wave or the Arab wave in Iran about 3 years ago, since COVID, there has been a rise. But since 2020, there's not much talk about this injustice. In fact, look at democratic movement in the US. I mean, first of all, very few people are saying that they're Democrats in the US now. You see what's going on. There was Occupy Wall Street. When was Occupy Wall Street? In 2009, there was Occupy Wall Street.
Right.
There is only reaction towards these things. There is not a coordinated and sustained effort to mitigate and to minimize globalization that serves to top up the interest of capitalism. Okay, you don't see that there has been waves. Yes, the Occupy Wall Street, and I think recently there was it has only been reactive, and I talked about that with Martin Oppenheimer, with the Occupy Wall Street and the Occupy. There was one in Occupy Philadelphia in 2008. I was one when I was at Penn. We did one in 2011, but it has not been as effective because of political. Of the countervailing strategies, policies that have been developed to minimize protestations.
What's going to be like?
To make free speech and free association to criminalize those activities.
Yes.
That's happening here in the United States now.
But I'm telling you, Pedro, there has not been a coordinated effort and an effective effort in terms of to minimize and to mitigate against global power of the capital, multinational, transnational. In fact, if anything, you find that it's happening now. Okay, fine. You see what Donald Trump is doing. So people might say, well, yes, he is removing. I mean, there's no more global strategy or globalization. It's the end of globalization. That is not true. It is not the end of globalization, people. It is renegotiating one's position in the global world so as to maintain one's advantage.
To maintain a supremacy, in this case,
yes, that is what is happening in the world today. That is why the US have a problem with Canada and so on, because Canada is now doing very well. Mexico is doing well. In fact, a lot of the Caribbean countries are doing well with Chinese influence. Chinese is modernizing Jamaica and their ports and so on. They're doing crime. Crime and violence is much. It's on the decline. It's on the decline and so on. So usually these are short-lived, but right now, and that is the problem. That is the challenge. If China is influencing these countries, and they are now. What if they start to do well? So China. Please remember, we live in a competitive world. I asked the question, who rules the world? It was the U.S. and the dominant class, the financiers and so on and so forth. But now, who rules the world? No. Where people are saying it's China that rules the world, or China is positioning themselves to become the dominant player. How are they doing it? They are doing it by learning from the mistakes of the U.S., learning from the mistakes of the U.K. and the post-industrial countries, former post-industrial countries. They are now doing business with these countries all over the world, modernizing these countries, investing them, repositioning them, and then these countries hold Chinese debt. And at the same time, these other countries are rising. Their currency is doing the currency is stable. They can now reach a level where they can modernize and start to export. They can reach a state where they will no longer rely on American goods and services. They can develop capital intensive. The Caribbean right now is the U.S. greatest trading partner. I'm telling you that. These countries develop where to become independent. It means then that they will rely less on the U.S. and then the U.S. will earn less.
You know what I mean? That's probably like
we live in a competitive world. China now is seeking to undo U.S. by strengthening. Strengthening. China saying, well, we may not be able to dominate, but U.S. power within the region, within the American region. China has done is now they are investing heavily in the Americas, heavily, so that they can strengthen these other countries. Once these countries are strengthened, it means then that they will rely less on the U.S. and the U.S. the U.S. strength, the U.S. power, the U.S. wealth, the GDP will be affected significantly because in other words, the balance of payment imbalance will no longer exist between these countries. These countries won't rely on the U.S. And that is part of the problem. That is what China is doing now to develop. Maybe China is not interested necessarily to beat the U.S. because they may not be able to get stronger than where U.S. is. However, they can help to diminish U.S. If China remains where they are, but through the satellite countries diminish the U.S., whereby these other countries will no longer rely heavily on the U.S., so they become more dependent, then China now will still stay at its position. You understand what is happening here? That is going on in the world today.
Yeah. Well, Reverend Renaldo McKenzie, thank you so much for being a guest in Neglected Story People History Movement. And you can listen to this program on Germantown Community Radio, 92.9 FM, or online at beattownradio.com. See you and thank you very much, Reverend McKenzie.
Thank you so much. It was such an amazing conversation. And if you guys want to reach me, you can shoot me an email, renaldocmckenzie@gmail.com, info@neoliberal.com. Or you can give me a call, 445-660-9198. And do get a copy of Neoliberalism. It's available right here in Philadelphia, in Germantown. I live in Germantown. So give me a call if you want a copy of the book.
Thank you.
You're listening to 92.9 FM, WGGT LP, Philadelphia, community radio for Northwest Philadelphia.